תזכו לשנים רבות, נעימות וטובות. Tonight's Dirasha is in memory of Menachem Meni ben Hannah, Shmuel ben Rachel, Idan Claude ben Sharon, Ava bat Ilana Esther, Fu'ah Shelema Lior Avraham ben Ziva, and Shalom ben Zahava Inna Refara Lahem, Betoch Sha'ar Cholei Amo Yisrael. Amen. This is a good custom that we have here in Woodmere, where we always come the night before Yom Kippurim for a special derasha. I'm very glad that I was able to keep this minhag, and Baruch Hashem, it's great to see beautiful kahal Berov Am Hadrat Melech that are all here less than 24 hours now before the great day of Yom Kippurim. I will point out that it is a happy day. I think people have a mistake on Yom Kippur, and they're very serious, and they don't say good morning to anybody, and they put their head down, and they have a very, very somber attitude. Now, it's a very holy day, but it is a happy day. Now, that doesn't mean it's a frivolous day. I mean, it's not a happy day in the sense like Purim, but it's a happy day in the sense that we're getting teshuvah. Therefore, one has to be joyous. I will remind you that tomorrow night we're going to say Shechayanu v'kiyamanu v'higiyanu lezeman hazeh. We don't say Shechayanu for Tish'a B'Av, but we say Shechayanu for Yom Kippurim. Lo hayu yamim tovim liYisrael. There were no happier days for Israel ki Yom Kippurim. So we're lucky to be alive, be'ezat Hashem, for this day that will give us mechila u'slicha v'chapara. And I will pre-bless the entire congregation that's assembled here tonight with a Shana Tova and Borechet. May you be sealed in all of the good books of life and health and prosperity and all good things. Amen. Ken Yehi Ratzon. Well, in preparation for this derash, I took out my mahzor for Yom Kippurim. It's about 600 pages. And I said to myself, let me find something to talk about that has been missed by everybody. It's been neglected. Now, in 600 pages, you can miss something. It's hard to focus on every single page. So there has to be one page in the Mahzor that is critical and has a very essential message, but for whatever reason, it passed our scrutiny. I am proud to tell you I found the page. And I would like to present my findings to you tonight. It's in the Minha service. So that's a hint. So towards the end of the day, as the day progresses, it gets holier. So Minha time already, we're already 22 hours or 21 hours into the fast. We're already angelic. And the Zohar HaKadosh calls Minha time Ra'avad Ra'avin. It's the time where the acceptance of our prayers is at its peak. On Yom Kippur, we actually have a Ne'ilah that follows it. So there's a second peak. And in Minha, we have a special reading. We take out the Sefer Torah. That's not uncommon in Minha. Every Shabbat we do that. But on Yom Kippur, we have a Haftarah. And that's an oddity, because even on holidays, we don't have a Haftarah in Minha. We don't have Sefer Torah in Minha. Even on Shabbat that we have Sefer Torah, we don't have a Haftarah. So this is a rare occasion where we take out a Sefer in Minha on a holiday with a Haftarah. The second rarity is that the Haftarah is the whole book. Normally we read one chapter, a snippet from one of the prophets. In this case, we're going to read the book of Yonah, cover to cover. And it's well known, the story of Yonah, as they say it in America, Jonah and the whale. Now, my question was, what does Sefer Yonah have to do with Yom Kippurim. Why is that the featured haftarah? So I found the Mishnah Berurah, and he gives a reason. He says, because if you remember, Yonah was a prophet, a true prophet, Yonah bin Amittai. Amittai doesn't only mean that his father's name was Amittai, but the Gaon of Vilna says you could read that word Amiti. He was a true prophet. And God commissioned him to go to the city of Nineveh and tell them to make teshuvah. And Yonah balked. He made a decision not to go, albeit I believe his intentions were l'shem shamayim. He felt that if he goes and gives that speech to the goyim in Nineveh, they will make teshuvah. It'll be a speech that'll have results, which I guess Yonah, and I should say most rabbis, are not used to, making a speech and having results. Usually people just nod their heads and they go their merry way, in one ear and out the next. And Yonah was used to that. So he was concerned that if the goyim will make teshuvah, that'll cast aspersions on the Jewish people. And the prosecutors in heaven will say, look, one speech from the prophet and the goyim became ba'alei teshuvah, and the prophet's been pontificating and sermonizing to the Jewish people forever, and there's no change. And therefore it'll be a prosecution against the Jewish people. So Yonah had an idea, albeit l'shem shamayim, to run away from God. He'll go to Tarshish, there's no communication over there, and he'll be able to escape his mission. Of course, by the end of the story, Yonah is in Nineveh and he's making the speech, and they made teshuvah, which means the lesson, according to the Mishnah Berurah, is you can't escape God. As much as you try to run, God will always bring you back. And God will give you a chance to return, like in the case of Yonah. So I'll just give you a simple example. Sometimes God will send you messages. And even though you didn't ask for those messages, but you'll hear messages. And that's God's way of saying, you're trying to run, but I'm not going to let you run. You're going to hear things, and it's going to cause you to come back. One time I was giving a class in Brooklyn. It was at this time of year. And the topic I was talking about was eating kosher. I was speaking in front of men that might not have been so meticulous in eating kosher. So I felt it was a good lesson for them. And there was about 10 men around the table. And I'm talking, gentlemen, you have to be careful where you eat, and the restaurants, and when you travel. And it was a strong speech. And I noticed that one of the members, his name is Ike, Mr. Franco, turns to Mr. Natkin, who was sitting right next to him. They're best friends. And he turns to him as I'm giving this speech, and he tells him, Jerry, teshuvah. So Jerry says, teshuvah? I mean, okay, teshuvah. You make teshuvah. What are you telling me to make teshuvah? The rabbi's not talking to me. He's talking to everybody. So he felt that was like a little obnoxious, that he should just turn to him in the middle and tell him, make teshuvah. Okay, he disregarded it. Mr. Franco, 2 minutes later, turns to him and says, Jerry, teshuvah. He said, I don't know what you want. I'm making teshuvah. You make teshuvah. What do you want from me? Live and let live. And we both came to the class. We're hearing the class. You'll make teshuvah. I'll make teshuvah. Finally, the third time, he says, teshuvah, teshuvah. So he says, enough. What do you want from me? He says, all I want is the tissue box. He said, I told you 3 times, tissue box, tissue box, tissue box. But Mr. Natkin didn't hear tissue box, because God wanted him to hear teshuvah, because it seems that he needed that talk. And therefore, you could try to run away, and you could try to say, he's not talking to me, but God will send you a message in your ear, and you'll hear what you're supposed to. So that would be the first lesson of Yonah. The second lesson, I think, God has mercy even on the goyim. The pasuk says, "V'rahamav al kol ma'asav." His mercy is on all the creation, and therefore it's very encouraging. Because if God has mercy even on the goyim, certainly He has mercy on His children, and therefore nobody should think that I'm doomed. I made so many averot. How is God going to ever forgive me? God is going to punish me. Well, look what he did to Nineveh. If God gave Nineveh, these were goyim that were acting in a very immoral way, and still God gave them a chance. So the mercy that God afforded to the city of Nineveh encourages us. Kal vahomer, or the more so, God will have mercy on us. And therefore it motivates us at the end of the day, make teshuvah. The mercy will come. But then, I opened up the sefer called Bet Yosef, which is the sefer of Rabbi Yosef Karo on halakha. And he gives a different reason why we read Sefer Yonah. And he says 3 words, Godel Koach Teshuvah. Because in this book, you learn the power and the strength of Teshuvah. So I said, fine. The only problem is the Bet Yosef doesn't tell me where in the book do you find Godel Koach Teshuvah. So I said to myself, he doesn't have to say. It's obvious. The people of Nineveh. I mean, these were crooked people. The prophet came and chastised them. And sure enough, one speech and they all repented. So I always understood that's the Koach of Teshuvah. That means you're able to turn on a dime. You're able to make an immediate change. One lady came to me last year and said, Rav, I heard your speech before Yom Kippur, and I want you to know, after your speech, I made a 360. I did 360? That means you're in the same place. I don't think God wants us to make a 360. 180 is a good idea. So here you see that the people of Nineveh, they made a 180. In one speech, all of a sudden they turned their whole lives around. I always thought that's the paradigm example of Teshuvah until I saw the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi in Masechet Ta'anit, Daf Tet, talks about the people of Nineveh, and it quotes a pasuk from Yonah. Vayashuvu ish medarko hara'ah. And they repented from their bad ways. Umena Hamas, that's a buzzword. Umena Hamas, from the theft. Asher bechapehem, and from the theft, the stolen goods that were in their palms. So the Yerushalmi says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, ma shehaya bekaf yedehem, what was in their palms and in their pockets, hechzidu, they returned. Ma shehaya besheda teva umigdal lo hechzidu, but the stuff that was under the mattress and the stuff that was in Switzerland and the stuff that was being hidden offshore, that stuff they didn't return. They only returned the stuff that was bechapehem. That's an indictment against the people of Nineveh. Yeah, they made teshuvah. They made a convenient teshuvah. They returned the stuff that they would get caught on. But the stuff that they diverted already, which there would be no repercussion, that they did not make teshuvah on. So the truth of the matter is, that is not Koach Teshuvah. If anything, the people of Nineveh, it is a faulty Teshuvah. It is a flawed Teshuvah. So I don't think that that's what the Bet Yosef meant when he said Godel Koach Teshuvah, where they only returned part of the theft and the rest they kept to themselves. So it's not the people of Nineveh. Okay, well, in this story, I always thought there's only 2 characters. Put the fish aside. Yonah and the people of Nineveh. So if it's not the people of Nineveh, it must be the teshuvah of Yonah. And I accept that answer. Because Yonah did make teshuvah. He tried to run away from God, and then God brought him back on track, and ultimately he repents, and he goes to Nineveh. But that doesn't show me the power of teshuvah, because actually Yonah needed to be pulled back. He needed to be swallowed in a whale and then spit out. If it wasn't for the intervention of God, who knows what Yonah would have done? So this was not self-motivated. So then I said, is there anybody else in the story that we could learn Godel Kawah Teshuvah from, and I found it. There's somebody else in the story, the most neglected people in the whole Mahzor of Yom Kippur. Nobody ever talked about these people. It took, I don't know how many thousands of years to finally showcase what the story of Yonah refers to as the Malachim. Are you familiar with the Malachim? Well, what are Malachim? Well, Malachim are sailors. You see, on the boat that Yonah commissioned, there was Malachim, there were sailors. Now, why do they call sailors Malachim? Just for etymology purposes. Because they work in the salt water. And the Malachim's shoresh is Melach. So if you work in a salty area, so you're called the Malach. Another interpretation is, for those of you that say the Ketoret every day, they took the 11 spices, it says, and then we read, Mimulah tahor kodesh. In purity, the Kohen would mix the spices. Mimulah means to mix or to churn. Well, a sailor has his stick or his oar, and they churn the water. They're mimalayach. They churn and turn the water in order to move the boat. So therefore, the one that is turning the water forward and back is called the malach. And I believe that the greatest lesson of the book of Yonah comes from the ones that you'd least expect it, because sailors do not have a good reputation. That's why they're called dirty sailors. Sailors don't live a ethical life by any stretch of the imagination. No disrespect to any sailors that are here tonight. Sailors live on the boat or on the ship away from their wives, and therefore their life is a life of infidelity. It's a life of promiscuity. The conditions that they live on the boat do not foster good conduct. The language that sailors use is less than respectable. As a matter of fact, if somebody has a foul language, they'll say he's a little salty. Because that's another way of saying he's talking like a sailor. He's a malach. Sailors are, outside of Popeye, they don't have a good reputation, that's for sure. And I'm going to argue tonight that more than Yonah and more than the people of Nineveh, the greatest lesson we can learn from Sefer Yonah is from the Malachim that were on the ship. But in order to appreciate these Malachim, and incidentally, the Gemara says that there were 70 of them. So this was a full crew. But in order to appreciate them, I said to myself, anybody have a Tehillim book? I said to myself, is there anywhere else in Tanakh where we talk about sailors? And thank you, I appreciate that. And yes, I found it. In Tehillim, chapter 107. You know this chapter because we read it on Pesach. And I'm going to read the chapter and teach it to you now. Just the chapter, the part that has to do with sailors, that is. So the Pasuk says, and I quote, Yor dehayam ba'oniyot, those that go on the yam, on the seas, ba'oniyot, in boats. These are the fishermen. Osem melacha b'mayim rabim, they do their work on the high seas. Maybe they're transporting cargo, maybe they're catching lobsters, whatever it may be, but they work on the oniyot. Osem melacha b'mayim rabim, hem ra'u ma'aseh Adonai. When you're on the high seas, you get to see the creation at its best. V'nifle'otav b'msula, you see the wonders, what is under the water, what is above the water. If you're lucky to be on the sea on a clear night, you're able to see millions of stars. And you're able to see all the beauty of nature. I was once on a cruise in Alaska, and we got off the ship at one of the ports, and me and the Rebbetzin, we rented a boat, private boat, with the Cantor Helfgott, because he was on the boat also. I figured he would serenade the fish to come towards the boat. It didn't work for me, but it worked for the Rebbetzin. She was catching Alaska pink salmon, king salmon, the most beautiful fish you ever saw, on the most serene day, sunny skies in the middle of the summer. And all of a sudden the captain says, look to your right, and you see a humpback whale. And then you see an eagle, a bald eagle, comes down and practically perches himself on the back of the humpback whale. Where are you going to see such a thing? In Brooklyn on Coney Island Avenue, you don't see anything like this. You have to go to Alaska to such a pristine place. And that's what Tehillim is saying. When you go to the Yam, you see Ma'aseh Hashem v'nifteotav b'msulah. But then the storm came. Vayomer vaya'amed ruach se'ara. And all of a sudden, God brought a tempest or a tornado, a gale wind storm. V'teromem galav. And now the waves start to become very, very rough. Ya'alu shamayim yirdu teomot. The boat goes up to the shamayim. When the wave rises, yirdu teomot, and then it descends. Nafsham bira'at titmogag. The attitude of the sailors on that ship, titmogag, they are melting, which means they're shaking. Yahogu v'yanu'u kashikor. And the sailors are walking on the boat like drunkards. Why are they walking like drunkards? Partly because they're drunk. But even if they're not drunk, because always when you see people walking on a boat, it looks like they're drunk, because the boat is never stable. Therefore, yahogu v'yanu'u kashikor. V'chol chochmatam titbala. At this point, they're in danger. And the Pasuk says in Tehillim, and all their wisdom, that means all that they learned, how to steer a ship, and how to sail, and all the different emergency techniques that they learned in the maritime school. V'chol chochmatam titbala. Titbala means it perishes. At that point, their wisdom does not help them. So what do? Vayitzaku el Adonai basar lahem. So they call out to God. This is very praiseworthy. They take out their Tehillim books and they start to pray out to God. Umemitzukotehem yotzi'em. And all of a sudden God answers their prayer. Yakem se'ara lidmama. And all of a sudden the waters go calm. Vayecheshu galehem. The waves go silent. Vayismehu ki yishtoku. They're so happy. Baruch Hashem. Vayanchem el mechoz hefsam. And they get to the port. When they get to port, they bring a sacrifice of thanksgiving to God. Now, these sailors sound like very religious people, but they don't pale into comparison to the sailors of Sefer Yonah. Now let's read what they did at the time that God brought a storm. Now, I must tell you, in Tehillim it just says there was a se'ara. Se'ara means a tempest, some high winds. But look what our pasuk says. V'Hashem hitil ruach gedola el hayam, v'hi sa'ar gadol bayam, v'oniyah hesheva leheshaver. Three things. There was ruach gedola, that means a great wind. There was sa'ar gadol, that's a great tempest and a gale, force winds. And the oniyah, the boat, was about to break apart. That is a much more precarious situation than the story in Tehillim. Well, what did they do? Vayidi'u malachim. The malachim were afraid. Says the Malbim, what were they afraid of? They were afraid of the obvious. They were afraid of dying. So what did they do? Vayiz'aku ish el Elohav. They cried out to God. Well, isn't this exactly what they did in Tehillim? It seems this is a carbon copy. It seems that when sailors are in trouble, they call out to God. It happened in chapter Kuf Zayin, and now it's happening in Yonah, Perek Aleph. But wait, we didn't finish the pasuk. After they call out to God, Vayatilu et hakelim. Then they started to throw some luggage overboard in order to lighten the weight of the ship. Why is the Navi have to tell me the method and what they were doing? They threw some overweight luggage off to stabilize the ship. I think the Navi is telling us a great hadush here. In Tehillim, you know what the first thing the seafarers, the sailors did when they were in trouble? They applied their own wisdom. They started to try to solve the problem themselves. Only after they realized that their chokhmah was titbala, only after they realized that they can't fix it, then when all else failed and they had no other options, then they said, well, listen, we have no choice. So they called out to God as a last-ditch attempt. That was a final call. That wasn't their first mode. Their first move was, which we would call it, hishtadlut. And we would say, yeah, you have to make hishtadlut. Well, they made hishtadlut. When they realized that chokhmatam titbala, nothing that they're doing is saving them. Said, you know what? When all else fails, take out the Tehillim book. However, in Sefer Yonah, what did they do? They were in trouble and they were afraid. First thing they did, Vayiz'aku ish el Elohav. And only after they prayed, then they said, now we can make some hishtadlut. Now let's start to throw off some overweight bags and try to lighten up the weight of the ship. The order of the pasuk tells us that their first reaction was to pray. Now that's not a dirty sailor. That is a great lesson that we learned from Malachim. They understood the power of prayer is your first option. Unfortunately, many people think, oh, well, the doctors, and then we go to the specialist, and then we go to the expert, and then when nothing else gives us good prognosis, okay, then you open up Tehillim. And the Malachim was saying, no. You start with the prayer, and then after you deposit the prayer, they understood the power of prayer. I think these Malachim might have understood the power of prayer more than us. They didn't go right away to their prowess. They didn't go right away to their know-how. They went right away to their religion. Now, I must tell you, they weren't praying to the same God that we pray to. Because the pasuk says, "Vayiz'aku ish el Elohav," and the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer says that the 70 sailors on the ship, each one worshipped another god, and therefore ish Elohav. It seems each one had a portable avodah zarah in their pocket, and when it came the time to pray, so everybody pulled it out, and vayiz'aku ish el Elohav, each one prayed to their God. It reminds me now, this ship of the 70 sailors and Yonah. Incidentally, the numerical value of Yonah is 71, because he was the 71st person on the ship. It reminds me of the United Nations that usually meets this time of year. So you have the 70 nations of the world that are all worshiping their gods, and you have the one Jew, the ambassador of Israel, that's Yonah, he's on the boat with everybody else. And of course, nothing changes. Of course, it's Yonah's fault. Everything is Yonah's fault, no matter what's happening in the world. But the point is, these people were not Jewish. They were not monotheists. They were of their avodah zarah. But they still had the understanding that whatever you believe in, whatever your deity is, whatever you have committed to as a belief system, that should be your first attempt for solution. Turn to your God. Why is God only at the end? Why is it when all else fails, now turn to God? Now go to the rabbi. Wouldn't it be prudent to start with God, it reminds me of a truism. When people make money, so they always tell their story, and then I did this, and I went that, and I bought, and I sold, and it was unbelievable what I did, and I outsmarted him, and I went this way and that way, and I made millions of dollars. And then when they lose money, they say, min hashamayim. As if to say, God doesn't know how to make money, he only knows how to lose money. So therefore, we don't give the credit to God. When we succeed, we give ourselves the credit. And when we fail, then all of a sudden we have a lot of emunah. Yes, kamzu letova, kol min hashamayim. Well, how about your successes, kol min hashamayim? So therefore, these people understood, yeah, they have wisdom, they have chokhmah, but if you're in trouble, the first thing is you open up a siddur and you pray. Could you believe it? We're religious Jews, and we have to learn this lesson from a malach, from a goy oved avodah zarah. But wait, if you look later on, Yonah's on the boat. So they ask Yonah, who are you? So he tells them, Ivri anochi, I'm Jewish. Ve'et Adonai Elohei hashamayim ani yareh. I see you all worshiping your portable gods. However, I don't worship that. I believe in the God that created the heavens. Asher asa et hayam et hayabasha. Now, they never heard of that God. That's the 71st God. You worship, where is he? Show us show us what he looks like. No, he's invisible. He's the God that created everything. So the next pasuk writes, pasuk Yud, Vayidi'u ha'anashim yir'a gedolah. And the sailors, they had great fear. The Malbim asks a simple question. Before in pasuk He it says Vayidi'u ha'malachim. They had fear. Now it says they had yir'a gedolah, great fear. And he asks a simple question. Why did they get more fearful? What happened? What changed? I mean, in pasuk He, they were afraid of death. I mean, once you're afraid of death, I don't think it can get worse than that. There's nothing more fearful than that. So what happened on the boat that at this point their yir'ah turned to yir'ah gedolah? Did the storm get worse? It doesn't seem it could have gotten worse. There was some sort of shift in the yir'ah of the malachim. So the Malbim says, I'll tell you what the shift was. Don't underestimate the power of tzaddikim. The Gemara says, whoever has yirat shamayim, his words penetrate all those that listen. Kol mi sheyesh bo yirat shamayim, devarav nishma'im. If you ever listen to somebody that has fear of God, the words leave the person's heart and penetrate. That's the power of a Yireh Shamayim. And Yonah had fear of God. And all he had to tell them is one line. I believe in the true God, the creator of heaven and earth. And it hit them into their souls. These are of the Avodah Zarah. One word just shows you how effective Yonah was. One word of Yonah, and now the Malbim says they had Yir'ah Gedolah. Yir'ah Gedolah is not that their original Yir'ah became more. That would be a quantitative Yir'ah. He says this was a different Yir'ah. This was a qualitative Yir'ah. In Pasuk He, they were afraid of dying. In Pasuk Yud, after Yonah introduced them to God, now they had a fear that was a big fear, a fear of Hashem. I quote the Malbim's Lashon. He says, Vayire'u malachim. Initially, hayta yir'at sakana. They were afraid of death, of danger. Aval yir'ah zu, the yir'ah in Pasuk Yud, after Yonah introduces them to God, hayta yir'at Hashem. Which all of a sudden, the idolaters, the 70 sailors, just have transitioned and have become monotheists. Look at this. Like this, overnight. Talk about the 180. A second ago, they were worshiping Avodah Zarah. To me, it also shows you how effective Yonah was to Goyim. And that's why he was probably scared to go to Nineveh. Look at that. He just says one line to them, and already he was able to turn them around. I used to give classes in Brooklyn in Ohr Torah Center. And the custodian of the building, he was from the islands. His name was Brian. And he would always come and sit in the back of the class. Wasn't Jewish, islander. He spoke English. And I would see he was enjoying the classes so much. And then after the class was over, he would clean up, and he's the Shabbos, he's the goy. And then all of a sudden, Brian disappeared. And we didn't pay attention because they come and go. We got a new custodian. And then like we asked, whatever happened to Brian? Nobody knows. And then I was in Florida, and I was in one of the synagogues in Miami Beach giving a class. And who's sitting in the front row? Brian, with a big white kippah on his head. And he's married to a very Jewish frum lady. And he says, Rabbi Eli, he says, you got me. And I said, how is it possible? I didn't get one of the Jewish people that were in the class. I couldn't convince them of anything, but I got you. That's the story of Yonah. Yonah, he's talking to these dirty sailors, and all of a sudden, before you know it, not stop yir'ah, vayir'u yir'ah gedolah, ho ho. And I have a proof that there was a transition over here, because if you look at Pasuk He, what does the Pasuk call them? Vayir'u hamalachim. It calls them sailors. In this Pasuk it says, Vayir'u ha'anashim. There's a difference. They went from sailors to anashim. Now they're already distinguished. Now they're already dignified. And this is all what the book is trying to teach you. Look how easy, or look how close a person is able to turn, even if he was on the other side. If the malach can make teshuvah, then anybody can make teshuvah. But it goes further. So the pasuk says, they try to get the boat back to the port in the storm. Velo yacholu, but they weren't able to. Ki hayam holech v'so'ed alehem, because the water was raging. So they couldn't get the boat out of the riptide to get it back to port. It was only getting more perilous by the moment. Now I want to ask you a question. It's a simple question. When a person is in danger, isn't it the nature when you're in the danger to make vows that you'll promise God anything so you'll get out of the danger? You know that to be true if you ever flew on a plane with some turbulence. All of a sudden, everybody shuts the TV. What happened? Everybody made teshuvah on the spot. And all of a sudden, you see everybody take out their books, and everybody's starting to pray. And I saw one lady next to me who was writing checks to tzedakah. She must have gave $10,000 to tzedakah. Everybody makes vows. Because if you think you're going to die, so therefore you want to make a vow to God, if I get out of this, I'll learn every night, I'm going to pray, I'm going to be tzanua, Hashem. Now what happens after you get saved? The turbulence is over, you land in Miami, now you're in the airport. Now once you land, most people, you forgot about it already, it's over. Does anybody after the fact start making vows and saying, wow? Now you might say thank you, you might bring a Thanksgiving sacrifice, but vows are usually made during the time of danger. Once it's over, You're saying, I got saved. I don't have to vow. Meaning, I got off the hook. I don't have to do anything. I got saved for free, so that I don't need to make a vow. That would be normal human nature. Except, listen to the malachim in Yonah. The pasuk says, they throw Yonah off the boat, and now all of a sudden everything is calm, and they get to port. When they get to port, the pasuk says, "Vayizbehu zevach." They brought a korban. I have no problem with that. Thanksgiving, like we would make birkat gomel. But then the pasuk says, "Vayidiru nedarim," and they made vows. They made vows to God. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. What do you mean? There's no danger anymore. That means these people became so pious that they didn't need the impetus of sakana in order to motivate them to do something for God. Even after the danger had passed, they already were committed to a life of making nidarim and vows to God. To me, I open up the Midrash and say, what were these vows? I'd like to know what these vows were. The Torah doesn't tell it to us, but the Midrash does. When it says, Vayizbehu zevach, it says they cut. I always thought that means they cut the korban. They cut the neck of the korban, which is true. But the Midrash says they also cut themselves and gave themselves circumcision. And the malachim became Jewish. Vayidiru nedarim, and they made vows of Judaism, vows to keep the mitzvot, because when somebody converts, they have to make a vow to keep the Taryag mitzvot. So they did Tevilah on the mikveh, Brit Milah. Look at this over here. When they went on the boat, they were sailors. By the time they got off the boat, already you have a synagogue of 70, you have a congregation. Kahal Kadosh Malachim. You have the congregation of tzaddikim. They became Jewish. Now, if that's not an example of teshuvah, the power of teshuvah, they got a message from God. They thought that the boat was going to capsize. They called out to their God. They recognized that they have the wrong God. I once explained the pasuk. After they called out to their God, it says, Vayatilu et hakelim. They threw the vessels overboard. Maybe it means they threw the avodah zarah overboard. When they realized that the kelim don't work, so they said, nonsense. Pe lahem velo yedaberu, enayim lahem velo yir'u, oznayim lahem velo yishma'u, af lahem velo yirihun, yedehem velo yemishun, raglehem velo yehalechu, kemohem yu osehem kol asher boteach bahem, Yisrael betach b'Adonai azam emaginamu. When they realized the frivolity, when the nothingness of the avodah zarah, vayatilu et hakelim, they threw it overboard, and before you know it. Now, I don't think Yonah never saw them again, because Yonah already at this point is in the belly of the fish. So he has no idea. As a matter of fact, in the belly of the fish, he speaks about the sailors. And he says, he says, they made vows, and they are talking about God, but it's all frivolity and all waste. They're not going to keep their word. He's trying to make the Jews look good because he knew that the sailors is going to condemn us. But it's not the case. The sailors turn out to be Gerei Tzedek. So tomorrow morning when you pray the Amidah and you say, Ala Tzadikim, V'ala Hasidim, V'al Sherit Amicha Bet Yisrael, V'al Gerei HaTzedek. Who are you supposed to think about? Gerei Tzedek, I always thought about Yitro. I always thought about Ruth. But now we have somebody else. Gerei HaTzedek, the Malachim of Sefer Yonah. They are a paradigm, classic example of true converts. That's the power of Teshuvah. And if they, who started off as of the Avodah Zarah, could make such a turnaround, we're ahead of the game. It's like one of the rabbis, his student came to him and said, should I go to the mikveh before Yom Kippur? So the rabbi said, it's very important to go to the mikveh, not only before Yom Kippur, but anytime you can go to the mikveh, it's a great thing. So he says, Rabbi, why? He says, just imagine. If a person is a non-Jew and they want to convert, they go to the mikveh. When they come out of the mikveh, they're Jewish. Could you imagine what it does to a Jew who goes into a mikveh? If a mikveh can turn a non-Jew into a Jew, imagine what it does to somebody that's Jewish already. It becomes a super Jew. And therefore, we learn from the story of the Malachim, if they were able to make teshuvah so quick, through a few words from Yonah, could you imagine us? We're not of the Avodah Zarah. We don't have the kelim. We might have a cell phone in our pocket, but we don't have kelim. How much easier for it is us to make. And if I think the lesson is the Malachim. But then I said to myself, wait, it's true there's a great lesson of Teshuvah in these sailors. But in Judaism, to be a complete Jew, it's not only your relationship between man and God. It's your relationship between man and your fellow man. You cannot neglect that side of the equation. So in this story, all you see is, they threw out the Avodah Zarah, they circumcised themselves, they made nidarim, vayitzaku el Hashem. Yeah, these are very pious, religious men regarding God. But if the story of Yonah is to teach me complete teshuvah, you have to show me the other side. What was their attitude towards man? Because I'm not concerned on somebody that is very religious in his emunah and his belief, like these men were, but when it comes to his social skills with people, he is mean and cruel and harsh, and he doesn't have the proper derech eretz, and he's not uncultured. I'm not interested in such a teshuvah. It's incomplete. So I said to myself, if I am right that the malachim are the heroes of Yom Kippur, I have to find out what was their attitude towards people. Not only did I find it, but it turns out they were just as impressive the way they treated people to the way they treated God. Where do we see this? Here's my question to you. When did the sailors, when did the sailors suspect that this all was happening because of Yonah? At what point in the story does the light bulb go on in their head and say, it's Yonah's fault? I always thought it's deep into the story. He's on the boat and they're questioning him and they take lotteries but I changed my opinion recently. I believe that they had to suspect that it was Yonah's fault very early on. And I'll tell you my proof. So Yonah wants to run away from God. So what does he do? He goes to the port. Which port did he go to? To Yaffo. Now Yaffo has a ferry. The ferry is a very easy journey. It's one stop. It goes, the itinerary is very easy. Yaffo, Tarshish. Tarshish, Yaffo. It just goes back and forth. It's like the ferry that you have from New York to New Jersey. Only thing is, it takes 3 days to get from Yaffo to Tarshish. Fine. So look what the pasuk says. Vayered Yaffo. So he went to the port of Jaffo. Vayimsa oniyah. You don't find those two words funny? Guess what he found when he got to the port of Yaffo? He found a boat. Well, what do you think he was going to find? Did you think he's going to find a helicopter at the port of Yaffo, or an airplane, or a camel? I mean, you're at a port. What do people usually find at ports? Boats. Is this such a big hidush? Oh, he gets to the port of Yafo, and you know what? Vayimsa oniyah. Oh, front page of the newspaper. Rabotai, there was a boat at the port of Yafo. Hazak Baruch. Beshita, Micah Mashmalan. Vayimsa sounds like it was a mitziah. It was something that was spontaneous or sudden. Of course you're going to find the boat in Yafo. If he didn't find the boat, it would be newsworthy. So I'll tell you what the Midrash says. It's incredible. The boat was making its way back from Tarshish to Yafo. It's a 3-day trip. All of a sudden, there's tailwinds. And the 3-day journey was able to bring the boat back to Yafo in 1 day. So the boat actually arrives to port 2 days early. The boat wasn't supposed to be there. But when Yonah shows up, guess what? Vayimsa, it's a mitziah. Look at this. The boat is in the dock. It was a hadush. Now, if you're the sailors and you're making your way back to Yafo, this never happened. We never made the 3-day trip in 1 day. It's like the Concorde. And where did these winds come from? Now, I'm sure in the beginning they said global warming, climate change, the weather patterns are getting all messed up these days. And they didn't think too much of it. But it is something that I'm sure they logged in their journals that this is something that never happened. The wind was able to blow our ship back in record time. It's a Guinness World Record. The fastest trip ever made from Tarshish to Yafo. I'm sure they thought about it, but I don't know if they suspected of any divine intervention. But I'll tell you when they should have thought of something. When they get to the port, they see a man standing there with his luggage. Now, why would he be standing there if the boat is not supposed to get to the port for 2 more days? What does he know? What does he know about this early arrival? How did he know that there's going to be a boat over here? I mean, you don't, even if you come early for the train, you don't come 2 days early. So at that point, you start to put pieces together. Hold it. Who's this guy? And it even gets more suspicious. Because the Pasuk says, Vayiten sechara. Well, that's not suspicious. He paid his fare. But wait, it doesn't say he paid his fare. Because if it said that, the Pasuk would say, Vayiten secharo, hasachar shelo. But the Pasuk says, Vayiten sechara, sachar shel ha'oniyah. Let me tell you what happened. So they tell the guy, how can we help you? I want to go to Tarshish. Okay, great. Well, listen, we arrived 2 days early. This boat is not setting sail for 2 more days. Yonah says, I need to go now. But there's a schedule. We're scheduled to leave on Tuesday. We're not leaving today. We have to wait for the passengers. Oh, the passengers? How many passengers does this boat carry? 200. Great. Here's my credit card. Run my credit card for 200 passengers. I'll pay sechara. I'll pay for the whole boat. And that's what he did. So I'm asking you a question now. You're not suspicious? I mean, listen, TSA would miss this for sure. Because they're too busy trying to find 3 ounces of water. So they would miss this obvious man comes and he's buying not 1 ticket, but he buys 200 tickets. And he wants them to set sail ASAP. And they got to go immediately. And now if you're putting the puzzle together, wait, we arrived early. There's a guy waiting there that knew we're going to arrive early. He turns the ship, which is a public ferry, into a private cruise. He's paying an exorbitant amount of money. The man must be running away from someone. I don't think you have to be a forensic to figure that out. I would have suspected at the port, this guy's fishy. No pun intended. If I was the sailors, I'm not letting this guy in the boat. It's too suspicious. Funny things are happening. We arrived early. He's waiting to get on the boat. He wants to pay for it all. Sir, listen, I'll see you on Tuesday. But the sailors, maybe they're giving kapsechut. Maybe they see a man in duress. Man needs help. Listen, got to help the guy out. So, I'm not saying it didn't hurt that he paid for the whole ship, so they wouldn't have to collect 200 fares. It's much easier to do it that way. Nor did he ask for a discount. He didn't ask for a group discount. He pays the full fare. Vayiten sechara. Now watch. The second he gets on the boat, they set sail. Now these are seasoned shipmen. They have maps. They know the weather. They just came from Tarshish, so they know exactly there's no storms. It was clear skies. If they thought there would be a storm or there would be choppy weather, they would not set sail. So there was no inclement weather in the forecast. And all of a sudden, they find themselves in one of the worst storms in history. Where did this come from? Again, never happened. Unprecedented. When you have 3 unprecedented events that happen, it's not a coincidence. Unprecedented that we got back to Yafo in one day. Unprecedented a man is taking the boat private and paid all the fares. And unprecedented a storm that threatens to break up the ship. At that point, if I'm the sailors, this guy's dangerous. This guy's bad news. I don't even ask him his name. I get out of the storm, go back to the port, give him back his money, and say, good luck. Go find another means of escaping wherever you're trying to escape. But it's even worse because the pasuk says, "V'ha'oniyah hesheba lehishaber." What does it mean, v'ha'oniyah? The boat. Now there had to be other boats in the water. It's not Yonah didn't privatize the Yam. There were other boats. Says the Midrash, the storm was only on this boat. All the other boats were sailing happily in the water. V'ha'oniyah hesheva lehishaber. Only this boat was in danger. So could you imagine the scene? It's almost as if there's a black cloud only on the boat that has Yonah in it. Everybody else is cruising, and you know how the boats go by. When you see another boat, they honk the horn, they're waving, everybody's waving at each other. And they're probably looking and say, what's going on with that boat? Who could be? What a bad luck boat. As the boat is traveling, the black cloud is traveling right over them. Not v'ha'oniyot, v'ha'oniyah hasheva lehishaber. At that point, that's the 4th sign. The sailors have to say, well, what changed? The only thing that changed is our passenger. We did nothing different. It's got to be Yonah. Now, no disrespect to Yonah. If I'm a sailor and I think the boat is going to break up and I'm scared that I'm going to die, and I have 4 good reasons to believe that it's this man's fault. And these are sailors. They're not the Lamed Vav Sadiqim. Exactly. You take Yonah, you throw him overboard. Without the questions and without the analysis and who are you and where did you come from. There's no time for niceties at this point over there. There's no time for social graces. They're going to die. And guess what? If they would have done that, I believe even a Jewish court would not hold them responsible. For the simple reason, the law of Rodef. Are you familiar with the law of Rodef? The law of Rodef says if somebody is coming to pursue you, you're allowed to kill them. Habal lehorgecha Hashkem vehorgo. Yonah is a pursuer. Now, they have 4 reasons to believe it. They don't have to die because of this passenger. They have every right to save themselves and do whatever they want. Instead, they don't do anything to Yonah. They pray to their gods. And then all of a sudden they say, well, where is this passenger anyway? They can't find him. And where did Yonah go? He went to sleep. Vayishkav vayiradem. So now the captain, they call him Rabbi Hovel. That's the one that's in charge of the Hovel. Hovel is the ropes, because it's a sailboat. So the ropes, they pull the ropes up, they pull the ropes down. So he's Rabbi Hovel. He's in charge of the mast, the ropes. We call him a captain. What does he do? He goes down to the galley and he sees his only passenger sleeping. Now, how did you learn this next pasuk? Vayomer lo, ma lecha nirdam. So he tells him, what are you sleeping? What? Now you're sleeping? Ma lecha nirdam. Kum kirai leloecha. Go pray. We're all praying. We're in danger. I always understood that the captain came down, saw his passenger sleeping, on top of his lungs, ma lecha nirdam. Took his hand, shook him violently. Maybe he took a baseball bat, hit him on the head. Get up. Don't you see we're going to die? See, that's the problem when you learn Tanakh without a book in front of you. Because you embellish. And you make up a story the way you think the story is. And you disregard the words of the Tanakh. And you forget the words. And already you're pre-conditioned to believe the story happened a certain way. If the captain was screaming on top of his lungs, shouldn't it say, Vayikrav elav Rabbi Hovel, and the captain approached Yonah, Vayitzak, or Vayizak, or even Vaydaber, which is a strong language. What's the pasuk say? Vayomer lo. Whenever you see Vayomer, what does Vayomer connote? Very good. Vayomer is Lashon Rakah. You know what happened really according to the true understanding? He wasn't screaming. It was like the stewardess on the plane when they're about to serve dinner and you finally fell asleep. And they think they're being nice by waking you up. Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, miss. Would you like dinner? Wait, now you wake me up. But how do they do it? They just come very close to you and they nudge you a little, they push you a little, so you feel somebody staring at you. Vayomer lo, ma lecha nirdam. So you see over here, such a derech eretz. The Rabbi Hovel doesn't tell him it's your fault. He tells him, what are you sleeping? Call to your God, because we don't know whose fault it is. And therefore, we're all praying. You pray also. Maybe he'll answer you. At this point, nobody's pointing fingers at Yonah. I mean, I wish, halvai, we should get to the madrega of hevedan et kol adam lechav zechut, like these malachim. I think we would indict somebody on much less evidence. We don't need so much proof in order to already convict. On a rumor, already, if there's a rumor, it must be true. And already we have a whole story built in our mind. And the malachim, this is not a rumor. They have evidence. They can build a very strong case why it should be Yonah, but they'll never convict him. And they just tell him, listen, we're all praying. You pray also. Maybe the God will answer. And by the way, well, I'll hold that comment. So Yonah wakes up. See what I'm trying to show you? Look how nice they are to Yonah. These people were good, not only to God, they had good ben adam lahavero also. Good people, these malachim. Vayomeru ish el re'ehu. I'm sure the malachim are in heaven and they're saying when they're looking down over here, finally, We've been neglected for thousands of years. Everybody's talking about Yonah. Everybody's talking about the whale. Everybody's talking about the people of Nineveh. And they skip right over us. But we were the biggest tzaddikim in the whole story. And finally, justice has been made. The rabbi has come to Woodmere and he has settled this case. He has set the record straight once and for all. The malachim in heaven, I believe they're going to be our advocates this year. The night before Kippur, we finally came along and we're reading a story like we're supposed to. And I have no doubt, Yonah's nodding his head. Yeah, these are good guys. They're good guys. They treated me very nice on the boat. So the pasuk says, you know what? We don't know whose fault this is. Vayomeru ishel re'ehu lechu v'napila goralot. Let's do a lottery. V'nede'a b'shelemi hara'a hazot lanu. That means they're doing a lottery. I don't need to do a lottery, by the way. If I was these sailors, I would have shot Yonah at the port. When he came with his luggage, what are you doing here? It's your fault. You're guilty already. Now he's on the boat. It's happening to them, and they're the only boat that's getting hammered, and they have a great idea. We really don't know whose fault this is. Let's do a lottery. Now, do you really need a lottery to decide this? And anyway, what is a lottery going to decide? Because somebody's name is going to get picked. So it's just going to be arbitrary. They're going to put 71 names in. They're going to mix it up. They pull out a name. So what? That means it's his fault? How does the lottery prove anything? Says the Malbim, the lottery doesn't prove anything. You're right. That's if you only draw it once. But if you draw it over and over again, and the same name keeps on coming out, then you know that that's not a coincidence. The pasuk does not say that they drew a goral. The pasuk says, "Vayapilu goralot." The Malbim explains they drew the lottery over and over and over, and every time they mixed the 71 names, guess whose name came out? Yonah lost again. We have a loser. Yonah lost again. But guess what? 3 times. Now, can you pick the same name? I don't know the odds. You have to Google to see the Shara Gilgulim to see what the odds are. If you have 71 names in a box, to pull out the same name 3 times, I mean, it has to be astronomical. You probably have to sit for 100 years and just pulling to get that to happen, where you're going to put the same name 3 times. I'm sure by the end of the class, somebody will whisper me the statistic. I'd really like to know it. Once that happened, it's a shoo-in. I think it's fair to say, with all the evidence before the lottery, and now the lottery confirming it, it's Yonah. I think it's a fair bet. What does the pasuk say? They do the goral, vayipol ha-goral al Yonah. Okay, now what do? I must interrupt myself because we're forgetting something. I wish we had a movie of this so you could see it. When is this happening? The boat is going like this. The boat is going upside down. They think they're going to die. The boat is, the waves are, so this is not under a normal, a cruise. This is under the most dire circumstances. And when your life is in danger, and you suspect that it's somebody's fault, you don't usually act with such deliberation and such kavzechut and such. Throw them overboard. If we were wrong, so we were wrong. So, by the way, the sailor all of a sudden has such an ethical standard of dinin nefashot and all these. He's a sailor at the end of the day. Such chum, we throw him overboard. But no, all of a sudden they have such a yirat shamayim. We can't throw him overboard. We're not sure yet. So they're willing to die. They're willing to die, but they won't kill Yonah. I think in the community, people do not have to be threatened by death to attack their friend. Much less has to happen for a reaction. And here the sailors are being threatened with death, and they won't harm Yonah. They won't do anything to him. And the pasuk then says, okay, where are you from? Okay, so he says, I'm a Jew. I worship God. And that's all he says. I'm a Jew, I worship God. Look at the next pasuk. So they fear Yir'ah Gedolah. We said at that point they started to believe in God. Vayomeru elav. And then they tell Yonah, Mazot asita. What did you do? Ki yade'uha anashim. Because the people at this point knew ki milifnei Hashem hu borayah. At this point they know that he's running away. And you know how they knew? Ki higid lahem. Because he told them. Nowhere in the Pesukim does it ever say he told them. All he said was, I'm a Jew, I believe in the God that created the heavens and the earth. All of a sudden they said, oh, now we know that you're running away from God, because he told them. He never told them anything. You know what the explanation is? At this point, he didn't tell them. It means he didn't tell them verbally. They put all the pieces of the puzzle together, and that's basically you're not telling them, I'm running away from God. They went back to the beginning. The wind, the port, the fact that he comes on the boat, only our boat. It's an act of God. God is coming after him. He's running away for sure. Now it's 1 + 1. He must be running away not from the government, because the government can't do this. The government clearly is incapable of making a storm over a boat. They can't do nearly that level of miracle. It has to be from God. So they said, oh, must be he's running away from. So this was something they came to their own understanding. Not ki higid lahem. Higid lahem means his actions. His actions told the story that this must be the case. Okay, so now they know. Listen, Pasuk Yud, they know. Okay, now that they know, now what do? Now you kill him. Again, I would have killed him a long time ago. I told you, I have to be honest with you. I'm just thinking to myself, if I felt I was in danger, I mean, if somebody's, God forbid, chasing you with a gun, are you going to start to ask them questions? Ma melachtecha, where do you come from? What do you do? Let's do a lottery. You shoot the guy in the head. And at this point over here it says, now they know. Look at the next pasuk. Vayomeru elav. So they turn to Yonah and they say, Man na'aseh lach. Tell us what we should do. V'yishtok hayam ma'alenu. Just so to get this water to stop. You're asking Yonah what to do? This is white glove service. You'll never get a better crew that treats a passenger that's a threat, that's putting their life in danger. But once already the malachim have fear of God, their fear of God also affected the way they treat the man that's created in the image of God. Because when Yonah says, well, you have to throw me overboard. He says it. Okay, now he's giving you the green light. Now, just to protect yourself from a lawsuit, I would take out a waiver and say, just sign it, that you give us permission to throw you off, just in case somebody's going to come after and say, no, he's giving you, throw me off the boat. At this point, not even vihi no'am, you just pick him up and throw him over the boat. He said to do that. Pasuk. They decide, no, we're going to try one more time to get the boat back to port. Velo yacholu, and they weren't able. Ki hayam holech v'so'er alehem. Instead of taking the pass, You're not giving him a pass. Throw me overboard. I'm fine with it. No, we can't do that to you. Why? Lo tirtzah. Wow. Look how mahmir they are on a mitzvah. Not to damage somebody if we have another option. One more try, one more chance. And finally, when they throw him overboard, they ask God for forgiveness. Anna Hashem, don't punish us for what we're going to do. They believed in schar va'onesh. Don't hold us responsible for this innocent blood. Innocent blood? They're still calling him innocent blood. As they're throwing him off, they don't say, this culprit, this rasha, please Hashem, don't punish us for this innocent blood. Ki ata Hashem, kasher hafasta asita. We're only doing what you want. Obviously, you're telling us that this is what you want because the signs are all here. We are fulfilling your will. And therefore, I say, when you read Sefer Yonah, Thursday afternoon, the members of this synagogue, wherever you pray, everybody will be reading the Sefer, and then you're going to get to the first perek, and you're going to start to read the pasuk, Vayiri'u ha-malachim, and you're going to look to your neighbor, the malachim, and what are you talking about? What are you getting excited about? Why is everybody looking at each other? Why is everybody pinching each other? The malachim, that was the... This is the page in the mahzor that the people neglect. That's why Yonah is read on Minchav Yom Kippur with the Bet Yosef says, Lehagid koach shel teshuvah. Not only on Ben Adam lamakom, but you see the Ben Adam lahavero, the transition that these people had. They not only treat God in such a wonderful, such a loyal way, but you see the way they treat, and that's the example. I would not call these people malachim. These malachim, by the end of the story, become malachim. Their behavior is like angels. So just when you thought that all sailors have that bad reputation, the book of Yonah comes to say, but these are the gerei hatzedek. These are the true converts that came and they understood that the Avodah Zarah is Hevel Barik. And they were able to make a 180-degree turn. And when you read that, and you say to yourself, if they, the lowest of the low, look how fast they were able to come to the truths of God. Ben Adam lamakom and Ben Adam lahavero. If the mikveh could make a non-Jew Jewish, could you imagine what could do to somebody that's Jewish already? We have a head start over the malachim. And therefore, we're ahead of the game. And we shouldn't be less than the malachim. You have to learn the way they treated Yonah, even though he was a threat. All the more so how much we have to be careful when it comes to Ben Adam Nachavir, when they're not a threat. How we have to treat our spouses, how we have to treat our friends, our neighbors, our partners. These people are not threatening most of the time. And then, Be'ezat Hashem, if we could get the message of this book, yeah, you can't run away from God. Yeah, God is mercy on all kind, that's for sure. But the key of the story is learn the lesson of the 70 malachim on the boat. When they set off to Tarshish, they were a bunch of Ovdei Avodah Zarah. By the time they got back, they were from, they were religious. They became the true Gerei Tzedek. Look at the power of Teshuvah. It's a one voyage, on one trip. Who knows what their wives saw? They came back with black hats and white shirts. What happened to you? Where'd you go? Wait till you hear the story we had. We met a Rabbi Yonah. What did he tell you? Not too much. But the way he said it and the Kiddushah from this man's face, he got us to make the Shua. And that's probably why Yonah was even more scared to go to Nineveh. When he saw how effective he was on the boat, he said, forget about it. If I go to Nineveh and give them a long speech, not a one-liner, who knows what's telling? But nonetheless, God said to Yonah at the end, you must go because you cannot run away. Borei Olam will always bring you back to the tissue box. He'll always bring you back to teshuvah. He'll always find you back to your mission. And these are some of the lessons that we learn from Sefer Yonah. May God inscribe all of you in all the good books. Ketivah v'chatimah tovah. Amen ken yeh ratzon.